Again, may I apologize to our viewers from all over Asia due to our satellite broadcast about my voice. This is a result of this fog, the fog and the smog. But now we are going to discuss the Philippine economy, the past 2014, and our common judgment here is that it has been an anti-people economy. To help us fill in the data and the facts is our guest from Ibon Foundation, which I get to know now is more than just economic research. It's a lot more, but we'll explain that later. So I listed some aspects, but you can add to it Mr. Sonny Africa, by the way, but I assume everybody knows him. Okay, GDP as a measure, shouldn't we change it now? Is the world taking a second look at GDP as a measure? Because there are a lot of economists who are saying this is not working, using GDP as a measure. So how's our job situation, unemployment, how's our poverty, hunger, productivity in agriculture, and so on? You know, choose your priority of this subject that you want, subjects that you want to explain to the public. And since you agree with me that it's an anti-people economy, why is it an anti-people economy? Go ahead, Sonny.
Okay. First of all, I disagree with your voice.
Okay.
It's a very textured voice.
Okay. Bedroom voice.
Maganda pakinggan.
Okay.
Okay. I think right off we can discount the gross domestic product as a measure of the economy for three major reasons. One, it doesn't actually show where the wealth is going, who's benefiting from the economy. Secondly, it doesn't measure everything that's relevant in terms of the economy. And third, even if the administration has liked it so much, the last 3 quarters have shown that even by that very narrow measure, the economy is already slowing down. So I think from the get-go, we can discount GDP as a real measure of Philippine development. To be very, very practical, I think the worst thing about the last 4.5 years of the administration is that it has been saying that it has been doing a good job, good governance, has good economics. It has been giving us a lot of praises from the international community, credit rating agencies, international investors. But at the end of the day, our problem is we're still facing the most unemployment in Philippine history. We're still facing the most number of Filipinos forced to go abroad in the country's history. We're still facing the smallest agricultural sector in our history. We're facing not the smallest industrial sector in history, but the smallest industrial sector since the 1950s, 50 years ago. So I think our biggest problem right now with the Philippine economy is that despite all the praises being said about it by the government, a lot of patting themselves on the back, there are some families, some foreign corporations making a lot of money in the Philippine economy, but for the nearly 100 million Filipinos, it has been record unemployment, rising poverty, and prospects diminished by the fact that our economy is no longer ours.
Would that also apply to the middle class, or part of the middle class, or most of the middle class?
The middle class is a bit of a tricky thing because it depends how you define the middle class. Without a doubt, there has been some increase in the proportion of the economy, of the population with a little bit of more disposable income. But even counting the upper class, which is maybe 1 to 3% of the economy, and the broad middle class, financed in a lot of respects by overseas work, which is not a good thing. Our middle class can never be more than 10-15% of our economy. So we think from the perspective of the people, which is the majority, we're facing a serious situation where at the very least 70 to 75% of our population is not earning enough from their work for decent living.
So what is the real score in terms of poverty incidence, self-rated and other measures? What is the real score? Some of the things I read up to 40, 50%. Go ahead, please.
Let's go to the most starting point. The government says we only have about roughly 25 million poor Filipinos. We can take that off the table because the government says with 52 pesos per person per day, you're no longer poor. So that's a very low estimate for poverty. So we disagree strongly with the government's measure of roughly 25 million poor Filipinos. We even also have to disagree a little bit less with the self-rated poverty. Because the problem with self-rated poverty, if you have generations of poor generations of people getting used to the low levels of standards of living, then they tend to underrate also their poverty. So at Ibon, what we've done is, using the exact same data set of government, we increased the poverty line from 52 pesos, increased it a little bit to 100 pesos, which is, again, not a luxurious lifestyle, but a little bit better than...
per day or
per person per day.
Per day.
Yeah. So if you take an average of 100 pesos per person per day instead of the government's 52, that automatically increases the number of poor Filipinos to 56 million Filipinos. If you increase it a bit more to 125 pesos per person per day, that's about 66 million Filipinos not even making 125 pesos. So I think the reality is, despite all the hype we've been hearing from the mainstream mass media and from the government that things are looking up for the economy, the reality is, by the government's latest income data, at the very least, you have 56 million Filipinos, that's about 56% of our population, on 100 pesos or much less per day, or about 66 million Filipinos at about 125 pesos or much less per day. So without any equivocation, we're facing the most number of poor people and the deepest poverty that the country has ever seen.
Yeah. I might be digressing, but to me this is the central question and the hallmark of the economy. Our electricity prices. I just came from China. Just to confirm, I always ask in every town I go to every city, every province, with the authorities and with the public, how much is your electricity? It comes up to around 3 pesos per kilowatt hour for the household, 4 pesos for the industrial. Here in the Philippines, it's not only 11 to 13 pesos fluctuating there, but also the households, the residential, pay 60% of all the cost, while the industrial pay much less, and for the huge consumers like the malls, maybe they're paying 25 centavos per kilowatt hour. It's a twisted, distorted system. And I say it's central because it also affects the GDP. That's why I call it gross domestic pain measure. When the electricity prices go up, the increase goes into the GDP. And so how does it serve the economy and the people?
Actually, the power industry is a good case study of the problems with our economy. Right now, we're operating under a power regime, under a law, a privatization law, the EPIRA, that wasn't designed by Filipinos for Filipinos. The EPIRA was one of the laws crafted by the United States Agency for International Development. They crafted the EPIRA law, they lobbied for it, they pushed it through Congress. So it created a policy framework. Their point was not to create cheap power for the Filipinos, for the people. Their point was to create a privatized power industry where domestic oligarchs can make money from that and buy their equipment and their technology from American suppliers.
And the financing
from the foreign, especially US banks. So right now, I know at the very least 50% of our power systems is bought from the United States. So you have a very clear audit trail. The intent of the law was not primarily to create cheap power for the Filipinos. The main intent of the law was to be able to, one, sell U.S. power systems, and secondly, to recycle surplus U.S. capital in the local economy and then take it back out again. So I think right now what we're facing now, even if the government is saying it's a problem of the oligarchs, the bottom line is because our laws, our policy making, our politics is not actually by Filipinos running the economy for Filipinos. It's designed by foreigners with collaborating Filipinos in Congress, as our previous guest had also already mentioned.
Well, we're going to take a break and then we'll get back to this. It's a very important point. So let's take this break.